Good morning and welcome to the GIBS Flash Forum. Today it's a real pleasure for me to introduce you and to be in conversation with one of the vibrant leaders in the banking industry in South Africa. I am joined this morning by Basani Maluleke, who is the CEO of African Bank. Absheni Basani.
Hi, Abshane.
Minjani sis.
Minjani.
Ifukile ngongwini. So we are using our common language on this auspicious platform of LinkedIn. And we're here today to talk about a very important institution called African Bank. So a while ago, I don't know if you know this, but a while ago I had a meeting with the founder of African Bank, Dr. Sam Mthombeni. I went to his home in Winterveld. It took me a long time. So you drive past Pretoria, you drive past Social, you drive past everything, then you drive a long way on a gravel road. Eventually you arrive in this kind of semi-rural space and you meet one of the most gracious men you'll ever meet. And to share the experience of what inspired him way back in the 1960s to give to plant the seed that Africans can own their bank in South Africa.
True.
And then, of course, this seed blossomed in the mid-70s. I think it was 1976, thereabout, when African Bank eventually opened its doors. There's a fascinating story behind that. Fast forward, here we are sitting in 2020, and you are CEO. Let me start at broadly and say, what does African Bank mean for you?
Wow, good morning, Morris, and thank you so much for having me. What does African Bank mean for me? So I love African Bank. The reason I chose to join African Bank is because the chairman at the time, who approached me to join as a non-executive, said to me, Basani, if you join this bank, you can be part of a team of people who will create a bank for poor people, or for poorer people, that is on the standard of an investor. We can actually create something that treats them with dignity, that gives them products that actually matter to them. We can find a way to create financial inclusivity. We could change banking and financial services for lower earning people in the country. And as a result, for me, it is about creating an opportunity for people who otherwise don't have access to finance, don't have access to affordable transactional banking, don't have access to insurance products that make sense for them. It's about making sure that we actually uplift people and bring them into the broader, the formal economy, so to speak. So for me, it's a very personal journey. I feel very strongly about being part of part of a structure, an organization that's committed to advancing the lives of South Africans. And then, of course, from a professional perspective, it's absolutely amazing to be able to lead a team of just such talented, committed people. It's a very personal journey as well as a professionally fulfilling journey.
So it's about purpose, it's about fulfillment, and it's about communities. These are some of the touch points that I take out of those introductory remarks. So before we get into the challenge of 2020 and what that meant for you as a leader, what it meant for you and your team in South African Bank, and what that meant for your customers, I think it would be, especially given my own history with the African Bank, it's appropriate that we clear the air around that. So banking is a very complex business. And for that reason, amongst others, given where African Bank plays in the low income segment of the market, African Bank has had a few starts and stops. Right? So in 1985, I think it was the first speed bump that African Bank had to overcome when it had a semi-failure. Then again in 1995, similarly, it had a semi-failure. Then in my time, in 2014, when I was a non-executive director of African Bank, it also had a semi-failure there. So help us to understand what is different this time to those times, because clearly we would not want to come back to those times. We want to look forward to a time where African Bank actually lives the purpose of Dr. Sam Mthombeni and his colleagues at NAFCOC, as well as the leadership team, the talented leadership team that you're talking about at African Bank.
I'm going to start with what's the same. So I also had an opportunity to meet with Tate Maponya and Mthombeni about, probably 2 years ago now. So they came to me. So fortunately, I didn't have to go to Winterveld. So they came to us, and so at the end of they then had the meeting, and they were asking all the questions about, well, are you guys remaining true to our purpose of creating financial access or access to financial services for people who don't typically get it? Are you guys still committed to making sure that you uplift people and you advance people's lives? And I was like, absolutely. And then they asked me about the vision for the organization, where are you going? So a very kind of a very rich conversation. And at the end of it, they were like, no, we think the bank is in good hands. Do you, right? So it was actually quite nice to get that kind of endorsement that, okay, you guys are on the right track, please keep going. But what's different? I think the reason the bank failed this very last time is predominantly because of governance failures. So this idea that, you would have seen in the report that was done, I forget what the commission was called.
Myburgh.
Right,
report.
Myburgh.
Yeah.
You spoke a lot about hubris. When you have a CEO who's been wildly successful, and the last CEO, at least during pre-curatorship, had been wildly successful. You'll recall the share price had increased phenomenally. They had a fantastic run. They were paying really very, very strong dividends. The book was growing, and by all accounts, the organization looked very successful from the outside. And I think the issue becomes, when you believe you can make decisions on your own, and you don't have strong governance, you don't have people on the board who are strong, you then can make very poor decisions. And I think then that's how hubris happens. At least that's how Myburgh explained it. And I think what's different this time is that we do have a much stronger board. So we appoint the board together with the PAs, or the Prudential Authority at the Reserve Bank has a view on whether or not we have the right skills on the board, whether or not the people we're appointing are the right people. And as a result, we've ended up with a very, very strong board, which we're all very proud of, and they play a very important role in making sure that we don't land up where we were before. Secondly, it's been about making sure that we provide adequately, because that's been really the biggest issue. So the issue is, if you're lending to people who have who are typically higher risk than what other banks would do, it's important to ensure that you have provisions that can protect the bank in the event that something does happen. And I think we've been very good about doing that. And then I think lastly, it's about culture. You got to make sure that you build a culture where your people understand that compliance is very important. Where people understand that if something is not working, that it surfaces and it's escalated to the right people who can then fix it. And I think we've been very good about building that and about making sure that we maintain the strong governance that was put in place in 2016.
Lovely. So let's build on that. So clearly, from a governance perspective, you want to make sure that you've got the right strategy and the right structure, as well as the right relationships externally in terms of your funders and so forth. So could you touch on each of those? So help us to understand what is the broad strategy that drives African Bank, and what structures have you put in place to support that strategy, and what is the nature of your relationships given you are still on a journey towards coming back to the market, it's particularly for funding, whether it's wholesale funding or retail funding, as the case might be. If you could maybe touch on those points for us.
So very broadly, our strategy is centered around, one, continuing to grow our book, our lending book in unsecured lending, and making sure that we start to access the more middle income people. So at the moment, we serve the mass market as well as the lower middle income, but the intention is to grow that middle income segment. That's a very, very important part of our strategy, because that will allow us to have a lower risk on the book, and as a result, reduce our impairments and become more profitable. So it's a very, very important part of our strategy. The second aspect of it is to start growing our transactional platform. So last year in May, we launched our transactional bank called, our transactional banking product called My World, and it's a beautiful product. It's the first product that's been built in South Africa to enable people to bank in families or to bank as friends or to bank in whichever group you want to bank with. It's a phenomenal product. And we've also made sure that it's priced as a very low fee income product to make sure that we're able to access customers who otherwise believe that bank fees are too expensive. So a very big important part of our strategy right now is to make sure that we start increasing the number of people who have that account. And at the moment, we're really pleased by the fact that we're seeing about, 25,000 accounts being opened every month, and about 40% of those people are new to bank customers. So we're starting to attract a broader market or broader set of consumers onto the transactional product. And then lastly, transactional banking is important because people who bank with you as their main bank, the people who pay their salaries into you, will typically buy more products with you. So they will be the people, they'll open their investment account with you. They'll buy an insurance product with you. We also have a market on our digital platform where you can buy computers and stoves and so on, right? Digital products. So they'll buy those with you. And that will help us to make sure we start to diversify our product range. It will help us to make sure that we start to diversify our fee income, which is very important because ultimately that's what's going to help us to be a much more resilient bank if we're not only reliant on interest income for our survival. Then lastly, digital. Right, that's the key word at the moment. Right, everybody's going digital. It's all about automation. It's all about creating platforms that make it easier for consumers to reach you, to bank with you, and we believe we have built the gold standard of platforms in South Africa. We believe that our omni-channel is truly an extraordinary thing. We built it primarily because we don't have very big legacy systems. So it's a brand new platform. We partnered with a fintech in Portugal to build it, and it's been developed primarily to ensure that you can bank with us 24/7. But more than that, to ensure that if you start a transaction at home online, you can easily finish it in a branch or on a call center without having to start from scratch. So we know for a lot of customers, that's where the friction is, right? That if I start something, I'm going to have to go to the branch and start again, and it's going to be a mission. So it's all about making sure that our customers can engage with us as in any way that they feel like engaging with us through whatever channel, and also cheaply, because ultimately we know that bank fees remain a sore point for South Africans.
So you used two words that I want to just bookend. One was beautiful, when you spoke about your One World?
My World.
My World product. And then the second word was gold standard when you're talking about your digital platform. Those are strong claims, right? So I can imagine why the My World would be beautiful, but the gold standard one, I think, is a very strong claim. So is it you saying it's gold standard, or are others also saying it's gold standard? On what basis do you make that claim?
So, we make that claim because we know that most of us have worked with other banks, right? Most of my executive team. So in many ways, I started banking, in fact, when I joined First Rand, when I joined RMB and then eventually FNB. And many members of my team, particularly the guys in our IT team, have worked across all the banks. So we know what people have. We know what people are struggling with. And then lastly, we know what customers want. And we know what people are doing overseas. So if you look at Alibaba, to me, I think is probably has the best platform that there is. The last thing I read about them is that every 2 years they rebuild their whole platform. And why you need to do that is if you don't do that, you end up trying to piece together the different parts of your technology to try and make things work seamlessly. And ultimately, it just creates a lot of friction for consumers. You end up with this thing where you've got that department wanting to do its own thing and this department doing its own thing. And as a result, the customer experience itself is compromised. So as a consumer, you don't want to know that there are different parts of the bank. You want every person you talk to in the bank to be able to see you fully, to understand that actually your last transaction was XYZ, and as a result, let me pick up from here and help you do what you do. And that's exactly what our platform enables us to do. It gives us a 360 view of our customers. We know what they're doing, when they're doing it, and through which channel they're doing it. And as a result, we can respond to them much more quickly. And so we know that's very important. The second thing is this idea around having open APIs. So the ability to be able to partner with different organizations quickly. So we can publish APIs, you can connect to us, we are able to then provide what whatever service you want to provide to our customers easily and without too much friction for our consumers. So it really is all about making sure that it's a system that is new, it's not kind of connected to many other older systems that kind of slow it down or create friction for consumers. And secondly, it's a system that enables us to kind of plug and play when we need to, instead of having to create, to plug that one in and kind of, almost stitch that system together with the other one. So it's a brand new technology stack that gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of how we can serve our consumers.
Have you been recognized externally for this technology stack?
Not yet, but we will get there.
All right.
Give me a couple of years, and I'll come back here and tell you all about it.
So one of the delegates on the call on the LinkedIn platform is asking a question. In fact, I'd like to invite more and more of you to post comments on the platform and ask questions. So I think is it Kabelo? Kabelo noticed, for example, that Capitec has now gone into business banking, and is curious, given the renewed vigor and the excitement with which you talk about these different platforms, why is there no business banking platform at African Bank?
So it is something that we explored in quite a bit of detail, both last year and this year. And I suppose the key for us is to try and get our transactional banking right first before going into business banking. Going into business banking is a very different skill set, right? You would literally need to build something, a very different business unit and so on, and make an investment into that. And we've decided that where we want to invest our money right now is into embedding our transactional banking and into growing into the kind of middle market, and thereafter to start looking at business banking.
So talking about then focusing on the individuals, people like myself, hopefully I might still be in your target market, can we transition a little bit into 2020 and help us to understand pre-COVID, what were your plans? And then what did COVID do to your plans?
So we have just come out of a strategic planning exercise over the last month. And what we've decided is that our strategy still remains sound. So by that, we've got 3 strategic pillars, and we believe focusing on our customers, on our people from a culture perspective, and focusing on data sciences and digital is the right thing. So we're going to continue to invest in those 3 areas because we believe that that's what's going to drive value for the bank in the longer term. What's changed predominantly is we are going to grow a lot more slowly than what we had initially thought we were going to do. And that's definitely a bit of a tragedy. But how we plan to compensate for that, Morris, is by starting an acquisition strategy. So given the fact that we think that the bank will grow appropriately from an organic perspective, we believe that to make up for the fact that COVID is going to slow us down, we need to look at acquisitions to help us to get back on track.
So before we go into the business strategy side fully, can we transition a little bit in terms of what did COVID mean in each of those pillars? So what did COVID mean for your customers? What did COVID mean for your people, and what did COVID mean for your digital strategy?
No, absolutely. So at the beginning of this year, from a customer perspective, we were rated South Africa's best bank for customer service by the South African Customer Service Satisfaction Index. So an incredible victory for us. We jumped from 4th place last year to 1st place this year. So huge achievement. And what's been interesting to see from a customer service perspective is that we've continued to do well. So our Net Promoter Score is at 51%, which is much higher than what the industry benchmark is. I think the industry benchmark is still about 30, if I'm not, but I probably stand to be corrected there. But it just shows that we continue to serve our customers. They continue to believe that they're getting very good service from us, and they continue to be satisfied. So from that perspective, we're happy. But where things have slowed down is on our customer acquisition drive. So we had definitely expected to have acquired many more customers by this time this year, but unfortunately because of COVID, we just haven't managed to do that. So we are servicing our customers well, but the growth in their numbers is not where it needs to be. From a culture perspective, So last year, from a people perspective, from a people and culture perspective. So our people engagement score. So this is the score that demonstrates how many people or how your people feel about being in the bank and how willing they are to work hard to implement your strategy. So last year, that score was at 60%. So this year, it's fallen to 51%. So that would absolutely show you that people are feeling they're a lot more anxious, they'll have a lot more concerns about what the future looks like, and they're just a lot less, I suppose, a lot less willing to contribute because they have so many other things on their minds than what they did last year. So that has deteriorated a bit, but that still is, at that score, at 51%, it's still much higher than the industry benchmark of 38. So the key for us this year is to make sure that we start to provide a little bit more certainty for our people, so they can focus on the work that they need to be doing. And then lastly, from a data perspective, a data and digital perspective, we continue to invest in our digital strategy because that is absolutely the future. That's what's going to help us to start to reduce our cost to serve. It's what's going to help us be more efficient, right, and relevant. And then on data, we continue to invest in it, but we're going to do so a little bit more slowly. So we absolutely had planned to spend a lot more money or to invest a lot more in growing our data scientists and in making sure that we're training more data scientists. But we've had to slow that down just simply because, again, right, investing in a time of COVID is much more difficult and there's a lot less money to be investing in these things. But it remains a very key part of our strategy, and we will continue to make sure that the data scientists that we do have on board have the training that they need to continue to add value to us.
I'm going to go deeper into the customer one. So let me, if you don't mind, I did get some stuff off the social media platforms. So one of your customers, Nicolette Goma, says, one of the most caring financial institutions I've ever seen. Big up to African Bank. Then Cecil Sleers says, hello, this morning I sent a message to African Bank. In a few seconds, I received a call from one of their consultants, a kind and friendly woman who helped me with my 1-month payment break, and within a few minutes, we successfully arranged it. Thanks, African Bank. I'm proud of your service. So, and there's a whole host of other comments about your consultants at the branches, showing humanity, engaging in a different way to what some of the common clients that you have with other banks they're experiencing. Just maybe take us into your confidence and operationally, without giving away too much of your competitive advantage, and share with us what is it that you're doing differently with your people that is helping them to really connect so deeply with your customers, resulting, as you say, in an elevated net promoter score of 51 relative to an industry score in the mid-30s. Yeah.
So, I will tell you this. I think a lot of it is credit to Ndate Motwenyane, Ndate Maponya, to Kernis, and everybody who has led the bank through time. The people at African Bank have very high levels of empathy, and it's the one thing I really hope to never break. They care deeply about each other, about their colleagues, and they care deeply about their customers, and that's something that's just it's woven into the culture of the organization. Secondly, we have identified what our values are, and last year we ran a fantastic number of workshops around embedding this, around embedding the idea of collaboration. What is collaboration? How do we work better together? How do we actually treat our customers? Then we also launched a new set of customer standards. So this is all about, customers want to be heard. Often customers say, I ask for something and I get something else, or I ask you guys to do something quickly and you don't. So how do we make sure that our people on the front line understand this and that they deliver on this? So we invest in our people, we understand what our culture is, and we continually make sure that people understand what it means to live that culture, and they know that if they don't live that culture, that there must be repercussions to not doing it. So maybe lastly, just to kind of explain the embedding of the frontline service ethos, is that every day they get the NPS scores, every branch gets it, every consultant gets it. This is how your customers felt about you yesterday. So then somebody must take you aside and say, and coach you. So we have coaches who then will sit you down and say, this is what's working, this is what's not working. So please, behave more like this than like that. And as a result, we continually improve.
So it's interesting. So part of the areas that I research in is in the field of accountability. And one of the more interesting papers I read recently actually is that accountability is important, but too much accountability is as bad as no accountability, right? Because no accountability is chaos, too much accountability is rigid, there's no creativity. So there's something else in between that is required.
Yeah.
And they talk about this notion of endogenous accountability. And endogenous accountability operates on two fronts. One is you're being assessed, but it's not in your face. All right? So like a not promoter score being given to you.
Yeah.
You're being assessed, but it's not in your face. You're not being over supervised. But at the same time, because you're being assessed and it's not in your face, you intrinsically then want to perform. So as a consequence, if you structure your organization around endogenous accountability, you get better accountability than if you structure it around high accountability.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like that's how you might have done it. So maybe talk to us about how you supervise and how does that supervising actually work? So I'm trying to test that hypothesis from that article.
I like your hypothesis, and I sincerely hope we're doing exactly that. It sounds fantastic. Look, so it's an ongoing work in progress. But I think the intention was to make sure that people understand exactly how our customers are viewing them. They understand when they're doing things right and when they aren't doing things right. And then after that, to make sure that we help them, we coach them. So maybe the point is we coach our people to get things right, as opposed to bringing out the big stick.
Yeah.
Obviously, inevitably, if somebody continues to do something to behave in a way that does not bring good customer satisfaction on an ongoing basis, then obviously the big stick must come out. But the intention is to make sure that we actually coach our people to get them to do the right thing. What we've just done recently, which I'm very excited about, is we've just concluded a contract with Call Miner. Call Miner is a US company that does call center management. And the intention there is that they're going to go off and transcribe every single call center conversation that happens. So you might recall we have about 900 people in our call centers. So they're going to transcribe every single conversation, which will help us to make sure that we can do quality assessment or quality management across every single call, as opposed to just on a sample, which will help us to make sure that we are compliant. But also what's really exciting is that they can help us to understand what our very, very good consultants are doing that our not so good consultants are not doing. And in that way to say, okay, look, if this is the gold standard that gets us the outcome we want, how do we help these guys to get to where they need to go? So we're continually trying to improve in terms of understanding where the opportunities are to improve our people and to help them to do better.
So building then on that at a leadership level, because this is really the CEO conversation, did COVID lead you to reassess your leadership styles or your leadership philosophy in terms of what you need to focus on? Or did you find that whatever style and philosophy you had pre-COVID was sufficient to carry you through the COVID crisis that we still find ourselves in?
That's a very good point. So I think, in a year's time, I'll probably have a better feel for what's actually changed. But what I will say is, so a big part of our leadership philosophy as a management team is this idea around psychological safety. So how do you create an environment wherein people feel safe to fail, feel safe to say, look, I think I may have messed this up, please help me, where people feel safe to say, actually, I need help. So we've worked hard on that. So we have a team coach who helps us as a team to get better at this. And I think where that has come in handy during COVID is that we can actually have a conversation that says, we're not doing well, right? I mean, COVID is hard. So where are we struggling? We can have a conversation around, how are people feeling? How are you actually feeling, and what does that mean in terms of your performance? If you're feeling really bad, please take a couple of days off, because you can identify that you're feeling bad. Take care of yourself, and because you can't take care of other people if you don't do that. And we've communicated this idea throughout the business to say, look, to all our senior managers, all of you are going to be going through unbelievable amounts of stress. All of us are feeling extremely fragile. Levels of mental health or mental illness are increasing. So if you understand that, what does that mean in terms of how you speak to your people? So I continually encourage my people to ask their team members on a one-on-one, how are you doing? Start having those conversations. So I think that's really what's changed, right? Making sure that you create more psychological safety so you can understand what your people need to perform.
Yeah. So in the DA, they take this next concept to the dark side, but I've heard that at African Bank it is kept on the light side, on the happier side. So the term is love. So I've heard that love is a word that has become the norm within African Bank, as opposed to in many corporations, you hardly hear the word love being used.
Yeah.
So what is that about? So I understand you are central to incorporating that lexicon into the world of work.
So one of the people I adore from a leadership perspective is Brené Brown. And she's written a number of books about leadership, but she's done a very, very popular TED Talk on vulnerability. And so I think it's the most watched TED Talk of all time, or at least one of the most watched TED Talks. And her point is that if you don't show your own vulnerability, you don't create space for people to know you, and as a result, you actually can't create psychological safety. People need to be able to really see you. To be able to do that. And I think part of people seeing you is about using emotive language. It's very easy, I think, and it's been very easy for me personally, throughout my career, to use language that's all about delivery and performance and metrics and so on, and never to kind of use words around, anxiety and love and kindness. And I feel like when you start, and empathy, when you start using words like that, you then create the right balance that you need for people to understand that we are people first, and then we can deliver for you. And so I was very deliberate when I started as CEO around creating a sense of vulnerability. And obviously it's hard. And it's taken me a very long time to get to a point where I'm more comfortable with it. But I still have a long way to go.
Lovely. Long may it last, and we'll come to African Bank to learn, because I'm sure my colleagues at GIBS would like me to also embrace more of those kinds of words, and I'm a good student. I'm happy to learn. And talking about vulnerability, offline we were talking about the amount of spend that you as an organization spend on the most vulnerable in our community. And I was reminded that way back when, 2014, I remember a line where the CSI budget then was R500,000. And I know that bigger banks will spend even more money, but I'd be very interested to know how much you've spent, not in terms of how you help your customers, but how you help the vulnerable, your non-customers, who are part of the broader community. What is your budget? Would you be willing to share what you spend?
No, absolutely. And now we publish this every year. So we spend about 30 million rand a year on CSI. And what we're very proud of is the fact that our people volunteer a lot of their time for CSI. So what I loved to see during lockdown was the fact that our people were still going out, masks and all, to package food for people who needed it, to donate blankets, to donate diapers or computers or whatever it is that their heart desired at that time. So our people are very committed to this notion of we are part of a community, and it is part of our responsibility to uplift that community. And then secondly, over the course of the last year, we've also joined a platform called For Good, which is an online platform, and that also enables our people to donate of their time online, which is amazing. So volunteering and CSI is absolutely core to who we are and how we behave.
Lovely. So I think for me then, building on that, can you share some of your flagship initiatives in the CSI space that really came to the fore during this COVID experience?
So the first thing that was a huge focus was around food. So I think all of us were very concerned about food security for people who were not earning an income during the hard lockdown. And as a result, we partnered with the people we already worked with, so it's Africa Tekin and a few others, to make sure that food was getting out to these very vulnerable communities. So we actually diverted money from other initiatives to be able to do that. And then secondly, it was very clear that, given lockdown, students in tertiary institutions in particular would not be able to go back to school. They would have to figure out how to learn online. And for many of those students, they didn't have access to equipment to do that, so to laptops and tablets, etc., and also to data. So as a result, we donated laptops to different institutions, including WITS. And why I mention WITS is that I'm on the WITS Council. And I remember the Vice Chancellor, Adam Habib, having a long conversation with us around the importance of figuring out how to give free data to students who are not going to be able to study or to use online platforms because data is expensive. So that was a very big part of what we did as well. And then lastly, we remain committed to ECD, early childhood development, and a big part of that again is food, because children who don't have food obviously can't learn. And as a result, we've continued to give money into that area as well.
Is that where you spend over 7.5 million rand of your 30?
I'm actually not sure where we spend the 7.5. But I mean, look, our threads are around education. Typically, it's around education. It's around providing, blankets and, poverty alleviation is probably more correct.
Lovely. So I'm going to go on the line. We're going to switch a little bit to some hard stuff, move into strategy, then we'll come back to the personal. So on LinkedIn, we have, let me get his name right, Daniel Thompson. And I suppose Daniel is concerned about your target market, whom you acquire in South Africa, but who travel beyond the borders of South Africa.
Yeah.
And so against that background, he's asking, from an African bank Forex section, as Capitec does not have a Forex section, shouldn't African Bank steal a march and develop a Forex capability, particularly given your target market actually lives beyond borders? So you might acquire them here, but they transact and interact outside of the South African borders.
I wouldn't be able to give you a statistic on how much of our transactions are cross-border, but they definitely aren't a large proportion. It's not a significant amount that's cross-border. The biggest issue for us, I mean, look, obviously remittances as a unit, as a function, is a big part of just money, because kind of how money is being transferred across the economy. And that's why our account has been designed to actually facilitate easy remittances. You can just kind of, you can open up mini accounts for all your people, for your mom who might be in Guyana, for your brother who might be in KZN, and easily transfer money to them that way. So,
but what about for my uncle in Maputo?
For your uncle in Maputo, provided that he's also happy to let me put it to you this way. You can open an account, a sub-account of your main account for your uncle who's in Maputo, and your uncle in Maputo can get his own card on that account and can withdraw and transact on that account in Maputo. Yeah. What we don't have is a way of ensuring that he gets the best Forex rates for doing that, which I think is potentially what your question is about.
Yeah. Lovely. So then moving up into the strategy field, so I hope, Daniel, you're happy with that response. My question is, one of the biggest challenges from a niche focused bank like African Bank is making sure that you have sufficient funding. So it's a liquidity problem. And help us to understand how African Bank is managing its liquidity, what its strategies, its plan B and plan C are, particularly in this context of shocks that happen from time to time.
One of the things we're proudest of over the last few years is the fact that we've been growing our retail deposit franchise by at least 150% every year since 2016. So we reached a psychological benchmark of 5 billion rand in September in retail deposits. And to kind of give you a sense, I mean, typically our run rate on retail deposits was sitting at about 300 million a month. And in the last couple of months, it's been at 500. So we've been seeing record months during this lockdown period, which means that more and more people are understanding the value that we're giving our consumers on this. And we are paying the highest rates in South Africa. And we're nailing our colors to the mast on that. And people are seeing it, they're understanding it. And as a result, they're investing more and more of their money with us, which obviously alleviates some of our concerns around liquidity. Secondly, in the last month, our shareholders concluded a shareholder funding arrangement in terms of which we can go out into the market to raise funding, to raise liquidity, and should we be unsuccessful in getting institutions to give us that money or to give us a proportion of what we're trying to raise, our shareholders will come in and close that gap. As a result, from a liquidity perspective, that's shifted from being our main concern to being a secondary concern. And I think our main concern now is about figuring out how do we access more low income, more low risk customers to take up our loan products.
Lovely. So it sounds to me that there's been significant growth, significant shift in strategy and focus from African Bank. This is all under your leadership, certainly. So I'm sure the viewers would be very interested to know, so who is Basani? Where do you come from? What makes you tick? And who else is around you that inspires you?
Wow. So who is Basani? So I'm a Shangaan girl from Soshanguve. And I suppose in terms of the people around me who inspire me, so my sister has just been approved by Parliament to become the new Auditor General. So they have to, there's one more hurdle, so the National Assembly must approve her next week, but by all accounts it looks like she'll be the new Auditor General, which is an enormous achievement. We are so exceptionally proud of her, and I think she has played an enormous role in keeping me focus on what I want to do. I mean, there's nothing like sibling rivalry to get us to do what we need to do to be successful. And she's been an amazing older sister. She's an amazing leader. She's extremely kind, extremely generous, works like a slave, and very committed to her craft. And I think these are the qualities of good leaders, right? People who are committed to their craft will do whatever it takes to become successful while acting ethically and building a strong team behind them. So for me, she's been incredible. And then I think secondly, I've been very lucky to have grown up in a lot of ways in First Rand. And as a result, I've got, Paul Harris, who from time to time I talk to and share some of my concerns with. I've got Sizwe Ngasana, who's been amazing. Sizwe has been so generous and kind with his time and allowed me to talk about some of the things that really worry me and given me some really good advice. And I suppose, between the two of them, they've been amazing. And then, I've got an amazing family. So my father was a judge of the High Court before he passed on about 3 years ago. He was an entrepreneur in his own right. He built a really strong legal firm. Starting, I think, in the 70s. He was very, very impactful in terms of, representing people who were arrested during the struggle. And as a result, we were raised to have a very strong social conscience because we were raised in an environment where my father was trying to do his very best to make an impact in terms of alleviating apartheid issues.
So you mentioned names of these men that are supporting you, but you mentioned your sister without naming her. So let's tell the world your sister's name, please.
Basani Maluleke.
There we go, Tsakani. So in case you don't speak the lingo, today we are very tribal in speaking Xitsonga. Basani means be clean, and Tsakani means be happy. So this is a clean, happy family.
My mother would be happy to hear that.
So on that, GIBS is a place of learning where we believe in lifelong learning. So here's a question for you as we conclude. So during this period, what is the one thing that is not work-related, that is unwork-related, that's for you, that you've learned during this period of COVID?
Patience. When I look back at the assumptions we were making in April about what the world was going to look like. Right, we had a very, very pessimistic view of what was going to happen, and rightly so. We were, watching what was happening in Europe, and people were dying. Hospitals were overloaded. Mortuaries were overloaded, so people were using ice rings to keep people cold. I mean, the picture was bleak, very, very dire. And as a result, we kind of then thought, tried to make all sorts of arrangements, and we're thinking about what the strategy needs to look like. And I suppose now we have a very different view of the world. We've got much more information. We've seen that the world's a lot more resilient, I think, than what we expect it to be. And I think perhaps we can be, maybe for me personally, I can have a very negative view. I can be very pessimistic about what the future could look like. And look, I've underestimated the resilience of South Africans. I've underestimated, what people are willing to do when their backs are up against the wall. Yeah. And as a result, for me, I've learned to be a little bit more positive about what's possible, to feel more hopeful about what the future could look like, and to continue to do my very best to make sure that we bring that future to life.
Basani, when I started in financial services about 30 years ago, financial services was about profit, not the people. And then 20 years ago, the governance failures in financial services began, firstly globally, and then much later, it even caught up with us in around 2008. And we're now at a point where the COVID-19 experience, what it has communicated to us is that actually banking has now gone back to its true purpose, which is to be an essential service, delivering in a trusting and transparent manner to its customers. And so I'm so proud to have had this conversation with you today, and I hope everybody else is happy to have heard the kind of challenges and opportunities and ways in which you and your team at African Bank are navigating this time. And we look forward to more successes for your organization and for the communities that you serve. Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you do.